On this episode of True NBA, the Los Angeles Lakers are one of the most prized franchises in all of sports. We have the story of how the team almost met a tragic end.
I don't think you ever start thinking that you're facing death, but I did start thinking about my wife and 2 kids. If something bad does happen, what are they going to do?
During his playing days, Manute Bol was well loved for his work on and off the court. Now, after his passing, his vision lives on.
All of us, we believe Manute was an icon, not only in Sudan, but the whole world.
Chris Dudley played for 16 NBA seasons as an Ivy Leaguer with a hard-nosed edge. We followed his foray into the political arena as the Republican candidate for governor of Oregon.
It goes back to a quote that I've always liked by the late, great Jackie Robinson, which is that a life is not important except in the impact it makes on others.
Blake Griffin of the Los Angeles Clippers has thundered his way onto the NBA stage. We'll introduce you to a rookie who is making up for lost time.
It was a long haul over this past year, but just to finally be out there, it's nice. It feels a lot better.
Hello, I'm John King, and welcome to the premiere edition of True NBA. Over the course of the next hour, we'll bring you some of the NBA's most intriguing stories, delving into the league's history and also focusing on the present day. And I'll be joined by a team of analysts and contributors from NBA TV who will be here to provide their perspective. Let's begin with an event that nearly changed the course of NBA history. It happened not on the court, but in a snowy cornfield in Carroll, Iowa. Jim Huber takes a look back 50 years later at the frightening flight of the Minneapolis Lakers.
Imagine a world without Magic and Kobe Bryant in purple and gold. Somehow picture life without Showtime. Leave Wilt in Philadelphia, Kareem in Milwaukee, and Shaq in Orlando. Let somebody else draft Jerry West. Imagine Los Angeles simply as the land of the Clippers. It all could have happened had things turned out differently in January 1960, in the midst of a Midwestern blizzard. For the better part of a decade in the middle of the 20th century, the cornfields of Iowa became a graveyard of sorts for celebrities. Buddy Holly's plane went down about 100 miles to the north of here. Rocky Marciano crashed on a farm about 100 miles to the east. The music died, boxing grieved. And the NBA suddenly faced a similar crossroads in the skies over tiny Carroll. Back in the early 1950s, the Minneapolis Lakers were the NBA's very first dynasty. By 1960, their legendary center George Mikan had retired, but these Lakers still had some of the game's most recognizable names.
Great bunch of guys. Of course, we had Elgin Baylor, who's a Hall of Famer. Hot Rod Hundley, Frank Selby, Tommy Hawkins. We were a close-knit ball club.
That January, the Lakers were on a seemingly routine road trip when they boarded a flight to go home to Minneapolis after a Sunday afternoon game in St. Louis.
We were playing cards just like any other team would do, to pass the time away between stops.
But it soon became apparent that this flight was going to be anything but routine.
I pushed the mic button to respond to the tower, and it just went, ew.
Lights got bright, got dim, bright, dim, bright, out. Electrical stuff, defroster, radio, gone.
Then it started getting cold on the plane. And the guys were, hey, turn the heat up, We didn't have any heat to turn up. The plane was in trouble.
We're in not only a storm, it was a blizzard. That plane was being buffeted like you wouldn't believe.
We started bouncing around, and boy, it scared you to death. The plane was just rocking back and forth.
The ice had accumulated on the windows of the plane, and the pilots had pulled that little side window out, and they're sticking their head out of the window to see how we're doing.
Somebody brought some razor blades up, and we were scraping that. And then about this time, the right engine started to cut out.
The pilot came in the back. He says, it looks like we're lost. That's exactly what he said, we're lost.
With the situation getting worse, the players considered their fate.
We knew we were in serious trouble. And I remember Hot Rod, we're covered up with a blanket, and he said, Slick, you think we're gonna die? And I said, hell no, we're not gonna die. But I said, if something bad happens, we sure got a good smell of the roses.
I don't know if you've ever faced impending death, but let me tell you what happens. Your breathing is restricted because of being in this really tense situation, and you're so damn cold, your body is twitching involuntarily.
I did start thinking about my wife and 2 kids. I thought, if something bad does happen, what are they gonna do?
5 hours after leaving St. Louis, literally flying blind, the DC-3 finally broke through the heavy storm clouds, desperately searching for a place to ditch. Meanwhile, here on the ground, even though it was the middle of the night, the word of the impending disaster had spread, and the residents of Carroll were asked to turn on all their lights to give the pilots a target.
It's like Christmas lighting up out there, trying to help us to guide this plane in.
While we were circling, I spotted this cornfield. Perfect place to land. And so I said, guys, let's get this thing on the ground here before we run out of gas.
A wet winter had prevented harvest of the field, so the high stalks of corn glistened like a beacon in the night.
I had Selvey beside me, and he's looking at the window, and scratching at it, and I'm over here shivering. And he's talking. He says, it looks like a cornfield, And he says, we're going to make it. We're going to make it. And I said, keep talking, Frank. Keep talking, baby.
At 1:40 a.m. Central Time, the pilots prepared everybody for a crash landing.
All right, buckle up. Get your heads down between your legs and hold on and put a blanket over your head if you want it. We're going in.
I was looking out the window, and Jim was calling out the airspeed, and I was telling him, you're lined up, okay, let her down, let her down.
They brought that baby down and cut the engines. No, not a sound, just the wind. And the plane was completely out of communication with everything. We had no turning back. And the plane hit like a basketball, hit the floor, bounced straight up in the air. The plane went boom, 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 boom. When the plane stopped, it was very quiet. It was unbelievable. No one made a sound, and we were just sitting there and looking around at each other. And then the cockpit door opened. Here come the 2 pilots with the biggest grin in the world. And then we all just won like we won the world championship. We celebrated right there, hugging each other. We did it, we did it, we made it.
There was a mad rush for that back door to get out of that baby. We were so happy to be on the ground. We were out there throwing snowballs at each other and everything else.
We trudged through the cornfield in the snow to the edge of the highway. And there we were met by the town undertaker who said, thought we had some business, boys. And we threw him in the snow.
The people of Carroll drove the happy passengers the few miles to the only hotel in town, where the jubilant players had the hotel owner open the bar, and they celebrated the night away. The next day, the team took a bus home to Minneapolis. And as they passed that plane in the cornfield, they couldn't help but think about what might have happened.
We could have been wiped out, and the history of the NBA could have been completely changed. And the franchise that is now one of the greatest in the history of the sports world may have never been.
The pilots remained behind in Carroll to care for the crippled plane. A week later, with the plane repaired, farmers plowed a snowy airstrip. And as a fascinated town watched, the pilots finally left Iowa behind, having safely preserved the next half-century of Laker greatness.
Back in September, the Lakers marked the 50th anniversary of the safe landing by returning to Carroll, Iowa, to dedicate a new basketball court the team helped build. Lakers Vice President Jeannie Buss said that night in 1960 was a turning point in Laker history because had the team not made it, the Lakers as we know them wouldn't exist today. Joining us now to talk about it, our panel of NBA TV experts, the 5-time All-Star Chris Webber, Hall of Famer Kevin McHale, and NBA TV's NBA insider David Aldridge. It is unfathomable to me to think of a league without the Los Angeles Lakers. Grew up a Celtics fan in Boston, and that was it. The regular season was just, yeah, whatever, let's get to the Lakers.
Absolutely. You know, you think about the expansion of the league. They were just starting out west. Baseball had beaten them out there with the Giants and the Dodgers going out west, but the NBA needed that anchor, and for Los Angeles to be that anchor was so important for the history of this league. Without that, you have no Lakers-Celtics rivalry in the 60s, and that was the catalyst for this league beginning to become an important part of the sports landscape.
Can you imagine a career without the great Celtics-Lakers matchups?
You said it, Dave. They started that rivalry in the 60s. And all of a sudden, when it exploded again in the 80s, it was big. I didn't realize how big it was until I got involved in it. And I can't imagine a league without Elgin Baylor, Jerry West, not saying Wilt Chamberlain, Los Angeles Lakers, Kobe and Shaq. All the great teams that have come out of there. It's just like you say, you can't even believe that there could be a league without the Lakers.
And when you had the great teams in Sacramento, it was the North-South California rivalry as well.
Yeah, definitely. It was that rivalry, and it was exciting. I can't imagine being in, the NBA without the Lakers. But also, I just think the way that they spread the good news, the goodwill of basketball from moving to LA at that time kind of shows in this period in time how much it's kind of shrink the world. And what I mean by that is we're talking about pretty soon, David, as you know, playing overseas. So we're talking about going from Minneapolis to LA to maybe even having a league in Paris or something. So it's just great as far as the strides we've come as far as traveling this league.
When you look back at that, the prop plane, the older days of travel, the more difficult days of travel, how about you guys travel all the time in jet airplanes, but any white knuckle stories?
Yeah, actually, I remember leaving New York, and we used to always try to get the shuttle back to Boston. So it was a sprint to get there. Usually called up the airlines and said, we'll be there in 10 minutes when we'd be there in a half hour. Just kind of held them up. We got there, and the pilot said, hey, we got to go. We took off, and we won. It was a typical takeoff. Everybody's talking. Got up in the air, and we were trying to beat a front that was coming in. And all of a sudden, there was the oddest feeling. It felt like you stopped. And the plane started buffeting and rocking and rolling, and it was really, really scary. And it was probably about 20 minutes like that. And then we didn't know how bad it was. So the next flight we had the stewardesses and the stewards, and they came to us and said, we almost stalled twice. The pilots came in and said, we almost stalled out, which means you go down.
Yeah.
All right, guys, stay with us.
Glad you're here, man.
Yeah, me too.
Charters today make it a bit safer. I guess everybody stand by. Still to come on True NBA, we'll introduce you to this season's breakout star, the Los Angeles Clippers rookie, Blake Griffin. But up next, we remember Manute Bol, beloved in his native Sudan and the inspiration for new hope in his homeland.